My name is Camilla, and I'm 38 years old. I thought I'd finally escape my loveless marriage when I met a man online who made me feel alive again. He knew all my secrets, every scar I'd ever hidden. Until one night, I learned the truth that destroyed me. The man I'd been falling in love with wasn't a stranger at all. It was my own husband, testing if I was still worth loving. I've been married to my husband Greg for just over a decade, and sometimes I wonder if the woman I used to be still exists somewhere inside me. When I look at old photos of us, laughing on beach vacations or dancing in the kitchen after too much wine, I almost can't believe that was once my life. These days, Greg barely looks at me, and when he does, it's with the kind of distant politeness you'd reserve for a stranger on the street. It wasn't always like this. When we first met, Greg was charming, spontaneous, and so full of life. He'd surprise me with flowers, just because. He'd write me notes on sticky pads and leave them on the bathroom mirror. But somewhere along the way, between bills, promotions, and the silent routines that settle into long marriages, something faded. I tried to keep us close. Date nights, long talks, little surprises. But Greg always seemed too tired, too preoccupied, too gone. I started to feel invisible in my own home. I'd cook dinner and he'd eat without looking up from his phone. I'd tell him something exciting from work, and he'd respond with a distracted, "That's nice." Nights were the hardest, him falling asleep on the couch, while I stared at the ceiling, feeling lonelier beside him than I ever did when I was single. One evening, while scrolling aimlessly through my phone, I saw an ad for a chat app called Heartlines, a place for honest conversations without judgment. I wasn't looking for anything romantic. I just wanted to feel heard again, to talk to someone who might actually listen. After all, talking to strangers online was harmless, right? I downloaded the app, half embarrassed, half curious. Within minutes, I was chatting with a few people, most of whom were either boring or trying too hard. I almost deleted it until a new message popped up. Dream writer, 89. You seem thoughtful. Most people here just talk about themselves. What's something that makes you feel alive? The question caught me off guard. It wasn't flirty. It wasn't shallow. It was genuine. I stared at the screen, unsure how to answer. After a moment, I typed back, "I used to love writing. I haven't done it in years." Dream writer 89. Then maybe you should. The world doesn't need perfect writing. It needs honest voices. Start small. Tell me a story. That's how it began. Night after night, I'd find myself chatting with him. His words felt warm, intelligent, and comforting. He had this way of making me feel like I mattered. He asked questions about my dreams, my fears, my favorite books. He'd remember little details, like how I took my coffee or the way my mother used to hum when she cooked. The conversations were addictive. I told myself it was harmless, just friendly talk. Greg wouldn't care, I reasoned. He barely noticed what I did anyway. But deep down, I knew there was something dangerous in how often I checked my phone, waiting for that familiar notification sound. Days began to revolve around those late-night chats. Greg would be in the living room watching sports while I sat in bed, my phone glowing under the covers. I started to feel something I hadn't in years, seen, understood, alive. Dream writer, 89. You have such a beautiful way of seeing the world. You remind me of someone I used to love. That line made my stomach flip. I didn't ask who he meant. Instead, I changed the subject, afraid to dig too deep into whatever that meant for him, or for me. Weeks passed, and the connection only deepened. He sent me little bits of writing, poems, fragments of stories, late-night musings. He'd tell me I inspired him, that I made him believe in love again. I felt guilty, but I couldn't stop. Greg had become a ghost in our house, silent and emotionally absent. In contrast, this stranger, this man with no face, no name, made me feel more alive than I'd been in years. Sometimes I'd imagine what he looked like. Maybe he was in his 40s, kind eyes, a gentle smile. He said he was a writer, that he loved old jazz records and late-night rainstorms. He seemed to know exactly what to say, not in a rehearsed way, but as if he genuinely understood what I needed to hear. I told him things I'd never even told Greg, how I feared growing old unnoticed, how I missed feeling beautiful, how I wanted someone to ask me about my day and actually listen. and he always did. It wasn't until one particularly quiet night that something strange happened. I'd had another argument with Greg earlier that evening. He accused me of being distracted, distant. I almost laughed at the irony. As soon as he fell asleep, I opened Heartlines and poured my heart out to Dreamwriter 89. He responded almost immediately, saying he'd been thinking of me all day. Then, without warning, he sent me something new. A short poem. It read, "She hides her light behind tired eyes, a storm of love she still denies, but I see her, through silence, through pain, and I'd give my soul to make her shine again." I froze, my breath caught in my throat, because I'd seen those exact lines before. Not the whole poem, but parts of it, phrases Greg had written for me years ago, back when we were still young and wildly in love. He'd scribbled them in a note on our first anniversary, calling me his storm and his light. My fingers trembled as I reread the message. It couldn't be. It had to be a coincidence. There was no way Greg would be on an anonymous chat app. No way he'd ever even know about Heartlines. Still, I couldn't shake the chill that ran down my spine. What if it wasn't a coincidence? What if the man who'd been making me feel alive again wasn't a stranger at all? The words that shouldn't have been his. I couldn't stop rereading that poem. Each line felt like an echo of my past, pulling me back to a time when Greg used to write words like that for me. Back then, his handwriting was messy, his heart was open, and every note he left made me feel adored. But that was years ago, before the silence, before the distance grew into something we could no longer ignore. Now, here I was, staring at a glowing phone screen, reading almost the same words, but from another man. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence. After all, phrases like storm and light weren't exactly rare. Maybe I was just imagining things because I missed feeling that kind of affection. It couldn't be Greg. My husband barely looked up from his laptop, let alone wrote poetry. Me. That poem. Did you write it yourself? Dreamwriter, 89. Yes, I write to remember. I once loved someone who inspired every word. I hesitated before replying, my chest tightening. Me. What happened to her? Dreamwriter, chain 9. She died 2 years ago. I froze. The simplicity of his words hit me harder than I expected. She died. I didn't know how to respond. Me. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine losing someone like that. Dreamwriter, 89. It never really stops hurting, but lately I've started to feel something again. Like maybe life isn't over for me. I should have ended the conversation right there. It felt wrong, dangerous even. But instead, I felt something inside me break open. Maybe it was compassion, maybe loneliness, but I couldn't pull away. Our conversations deepened after that night. He told me stories about his late wife, how she loved old movies and left notes on his pillow just because. Every detail made me ache because in some twisted way, it reminded me of myself. Dreamwriter, an 89. You remind me of her. Not because you look like her, but because you feel like her. Kind, curious, real. I told myself he was just being sweet, but part of me started craving his messages more than air. His words felt like sunlight through the cracks of my life, filling spaces Greg no longer touched. Meanwhile, Greg grew even more distant. He started working late, coming home well past midnight, with excuses about deadlines and client meetings. The smell of coffee and cold air clung to him when he slipped into bed beside me. I'd turn toward him, hoping for a word, a touch, something, but he'd already be half asleep. I told myself I had no right to be upset. After all, I was guilty too. I was emotionally involved with another man, even if it was just through a screen. But there was a difference. Greg had withdrawn from me long ago, and this stranger had found the pieces of me that were left behind. One night, Dreamwriter 89, and I started talking about love, the kind that doesn't fade even when it should. Me. Do you think it's possible to fall in love twice? Dreamwriter, Sharon 89. I think it's possible to fall in love with the same soul twice. Sometimes she just wears a different face. That line stayed with me for days. He had a way of making every word sound like it was written just for me. I told him about the books I loved, the places I'd always dreamed of visiting. He said he wanted to see them too, that maybe someday we'd go together. The conversation started to get more personal, more intimate. It wasn't just emotional anymore. He told me I sounded beautiful, that he could imagine my smile. I sent him a picture once, just my hand holding a cup of coffee near the window. No face, no real clue who I was. He said it was perfect. In return, he sent a photo too, a black and white shot of a man's hand holding a pen over a notebook. No face, just enough to keep the mystery alive. That night, I dreamed of him. Not Greg, him. The man behind the screen whose words filled the empty spaces in my chest. Every time Greg ignored me, I found myself running back to my phone. Every time he brushed off a conversation or left me talking to myself, I felt my anger simmer and my guilt fade. Was it cheating if there was no physical touch? Because in my heart, it felt like I was being unfaithful. But in my mind, I told myself this was the only place I was still allowed to feel something. The guilt came in waves, usually at night when Greg was asleep beside me, and I'd be hiding under the blanket, typing away. Sometimes I'd glance at his sleeping face and wonder how I got here, how we went from everything to nothing. Then another message would come in. Dreamwriter89. You have no idea how much you've changed my life. You've given me hope again. And just like that, the guilt would fade into something that felt dangerously close to love. As the weeks passed, I noticed something strange. Some of his stories, small, random things, started to sound familiar. He mentioned working in marketing. Greg worked in marketing. He said his favorite movie was Casablanca. Greg used to love that movie. I brushed it off. Lots of men liked Casablanca. It didn't mean anything. Still, every time he described his late wife, I found myself squinting at the words, feeling a strange pull in my chest. The way he described her laugh, her stubbornness, her quiet strength, it sounded like he was describing me. But that was impossible. Greg wasn't romantic anymore, and certainly not the type to join some anonymous chat app. One night, after another fight with Greg about how distracted I'd been lately, I went straight to Heartlines. My hands were trembling as I typed, me. Sometimes I wish we could meet. Just once. Dreamwriter89. Maybe we can. There's a little cafe I love. It's quiet, cozy, perfect for two people who need to breathe. Again? I felt my pulse quicken. Me. Where? Dreamwriter89. Corner of Maple and 3rd, the one with the old piano inside. My breath caught. That cafe. Greg had taken me there on our first date, the same cafe where he told me I was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. The words blurred on the screen as my heart began to race. Was it just another coincidence, or something far more terrifying? For 2 nights after he suggested the cafe, I didn't sleep. The thought of meeting Dreamwriter89, Tasha, made my stomach twist with a blend of guilt, fear, and excitement. Every rational part of me screamed that it was wrong, that I was married, that I was betraying vows I once took seriously. But another part, the lonely, aching part, whispered that maybe this was my chance to feel something again. He messaged me the next morning. Dreamwriter89. Would you really come, just to talk? I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. Me. Yes, just to talk. It felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. I lied to Greg easily that evening, which scared me almost as much as the lie itself. I told him an old college friend was in town and wanted to catch up over coffee. He barely looked up from his laptop when he said, "That's nice. Have fun." Have fun. Those 2 words sliced through me. He didn't ask which friend or where or even what time I'd be home. I could have been walking into the arms of another man, and he wouldn't have cared. I spent an hour deciding what to wear. Not because I wanted to impress this stranger, but because I wanted to feel beautiful again. I chose a simple blue dress that Greg used to love, the one he once said made my eyes look like summer. I hadn't worn it in years. When I saw myself in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Nervous, hopeful, a little scared. The cafe on Maple and 3rd hadn't changed much. The same faded red awning, the same small chalkboard sign that read, "Today's special, lemon tart and lattes." The smell of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon instantly took me back to that first date with Greg. The night he told me I had a storyteller's smile. I chose a corner table facing the door. My hands trembled as I wrapped them around my coffee cup. The steam curled toward my face like smoke, blurring the reflection in the window. Then my phone buzzed. Dreamwriter Shenanigans. I'm close, just parking. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Me, take your time, I'm here. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Every time the bell over the door chimed, I looked up, expecting to see him. A man in a dark jacket walked in, glanced around, and sat at the counter. Then a young couple entered, laughing, holding hands. An elderly man nodded politely as he passed, but none of them were him. Another message appeared. Dream writer, 89. You look beautiful tonight. I froze, scanning the cafe. He could see me. Me. Where are you? Dream writer, 89. Close, just nervous. You remind me of her. Her. The wife he said had died. I typed, it's okay, you don't have to be nervous. Then nothing. Minutes turned into 20, then 40. My coffee went cold. The waitress refilled it twice out of pity. I sat there, my stomach tightening, the glow of excitement draining into humiliation. Had I really been that foolish? Was this all a game to him? I checked the time, almost 9 p.m. My heart felt heavy as I stood, smoothing my dress. I felt ridiculous, like a teenager waiting for a date who'd never show. As I stepped outside, the evening breeze felt colder than usual. My phone buzzed again. Greg calling. Greg. Hey, you still out? Me. Yeah, we just wrapped up. Heading home soon. Greg. Okay, I'll be late. Don't wait up. His voice was distant, almost mechanical. Sure, I said softly, but he'd already hung up. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent the evening waiting for one man while lying to another, and both had left me alone in the end. When I got home, I took off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock. I felt foolish, small, and deeply tired. I opened my laptop, ready to end it for good, to tell Dreamwriter 89 that whatever this was, it needed to stop. I needed to stop. But when the app loaded, his name was gone. The chat history had vanished completely, like it had never existed. For a second, I thought maybe I'd been blocked. My throat tightened as I scrolled through my messages, my heart thudding faster with each empty search result. Then, suddenly, a notification popped up. A new message request. The username wasn't Dreamwriter89 anymore. It was something new. Second chance. 77. Camilla, please don't be angry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at the name, my mind spinning. How did he know my real name? I had never told him. Not once. Me. Who are you? Second chance. 77. Someone who needed to see you. I'm sorry I couldn't come inside. You looked perfect. I couldn't face you. A chill crept down my spine. He had been there, watching. Me. You were outside? Second chance. 77. I was. I panicked. I wasn't ready to see you like that. My hands shook as I typed. Me. Why did you change your name? Second chance. 77. Because I wanted a fresh start. With you. I sat frozen, staring at the words on the screen. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. There was something both terrifying and intoxicating about the idea that he had been near me, close enough to see me, yet chose to hide. I slammed my laptop shut, pushing it away as if the device itself might burn me. My reflection in the darkened window looked haunted, like a woman caught between two worlds. Part of me wanted to scream, to delete everything, to run into Greg's arms and confess everything just to end the guilt. But another part, some twisted, curious part, wanted to know why. Why had he been there? Why didn't he come in? That night, I lay awake, my mind replaying every moment at the cafe. The poem, the familiar phrases, the cafe, the way he knew my name. Each piece a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. When dawn crept through the curtains, I reached for my laptop again, half dreading what I'd see. The screen flickered to life, and there it was, the new message, glowing softly like a secret. Second chance. 77. Please don't give up on me yet. I promise I'll explain everything. I didn't reply. I couldn't, because deep down I already knew that whatever explanation he had was going to change everything. Second chances and hidden truths. I told myself I wouldn't reply. I told myself I'd block him, delete the app, and finally end this whole mess before it destroyed whatever was left of my marriage. But when I opened my laptop the next morning, his message was still there, glowing on the screen like a wound that wouldn't close. Second chance, 77. Please don't give up on me yet. I promise I'll explain everything. I should have ignored it, but I didn't. Me. Explain what? You said you were at the cafe. Why didn't you come inside? Second chance, 77. I panicked. You were more beautiful than I imagined. I didn't know how to face you after everything I told you. His words made my stomach twist, but they also melted something inside me. Against every instinct, I typed back, me. You scared me. You knew my name. Second chance, 77. Because I care about you. I needed to know who you really were. I couldn't stop myself. It should have frightened me more than it did. But the truth was, part of me wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe this wasn't just another cruel trick, that what we shared was something real, something rare. We began talking again, though this time I made him promise never to mention that night at the cafe. We went back to the kind of conversations that had first drawn me in. Long, honest talks about regret and loneliness, about the pieces of ourselves we'd lost over time. Second chance, 77. Do you ever wish you could start over? Me. Every day. Second chance, 77. Then maybe that's why we met, to give each other a second chance. His words filled the quiet corners of my day. Every time my phone buzzed, my pulse jumped. Greg would glance over from the couch sometimes, asking casually, "Who's that?" And I'd smile too quickly, pretending it was work or a friend. I started locking my phone, deleting messages the moment I read them. The guilt was constant, but strangely numb, like a dull ache you learn to live with. I justified it all by telling myself that I wasn't cheating. There were no touches, no kisses, just words. But words can be more dangerous than anything physical. One evening, as our chat deepened, he asked me a question that made my breath catch. Second chance, 77. Can I ask you something personal? Me. You already know everything about me. Second chance, 77. Not everything. Are you married? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I stared at the question for what felt like hours. Finally, I typed back. Me. No. Divorced. A long time ago. The lie rolled off my fingertips too easily. I told myself it was just to protect my identity, but in my heart, I knew it was because I wanted to keep him. Second chance, 77. I understand. I'm married too, technically, but it's over. She's there, but not really there, you know? I stared at that line until it blurred. The eerie familiarity of his words unsettled me. Greg could have said that exact thing about us. Me. That sounds painful. Second chance, 77. It is. She used to be my best friend. Now it's like living with a stranger. My pulse quickened. The parallels were too strange, but I brushed it off, telling myself it was just coincidence. So many marriages fell into silence after all. The days blurred together. Greg started behaving differently. He'd watch me as I cooked, his eyes following me in quiet moments. Once, I caught him standing in the hallway, just looking at me as I folded laundry. When I asked what was wrong, he smiled faintly and said, "Nothing, just thinking about us." It was such an odd thing for him to say after months of distance. I wanted to believe it meant something good, that maybe he was trying. But his timing made me uneasy. At dinner one night, he asked softly, "Are you happy, Camilla?" The fork nearly slipped from my hand. "Why are you asking?" He shrugged, eyes dropping to his plate. "You've seemed different lately, distant." The irony made my stomach churn. If only he knew how true that was. I lied again, saying work was stressful, that I was tired. He nodded, but I caught a strange glint in his eyes, something between curiosity and suspicion. After that, I became more careful. I deleted chat logs, cleared browser history, and turned my phone face down on the nightstand. Every vibration made me jump, but despite the guilt, I couldn't let go. Second chance, 77, had become my escape. When we talked, I felt understood. He listened. He cared. Second chance, 77. You deserve to be seen, Camilla, to be wanted. That message broke me, because Greg used to say those exact words back when we were still in love. The next day, Greg texted me at lunch, something he hadn't done in years. "Greg, thinking about you today. Hope you're having a good one." I stared at the message for minutes, torn between confusion and panic. It was out of character for him, almost. timed. That night when I came home, he greeted me at the door with a kiss on the cheek. It was gentle, hesitant, like the kind of kiss you give a stranger. "Everything okay?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Just trying to be better." Those words echoed in my mind for hours afterward. I messaged, Second Chance 77, later that night, seeking comfort. Me. "I think my husband suspects something." Second Chance 77. "Does he know?" Me. "No, but he's been acting weird." Second Chance 77. "Maybe he's just trying to win you back." Me. "Too late for that." Second Chance 77. "You really think so?" Me. "Yes." Second Chance 77. "Then maybe it's time you let yourself fall again." His message sent a thrill through me I couldn't explain. I closed my eyes and let the words wash over me, imagining a life where I could start over, where someone looked at me the way Greg used to. But as I stared at the screen, something gnawed at me. The rhythm of his writing, the phrasing, even the punctuation, short sentences, deliberate pauses, felt familiar. Too familiar. It wasn't until the next evening that everything began to crack. I was lying in bed when my phone buzzed. A new message from him. Second Chance, 77. "I made something for you. Don't laugh." Attached was an audio file. I hesitated before pressing play. The sound that filled the room made my heart stop. A man's voice, low, calm, and achingly familiar, reading a few lines of a poem. "You're still the storm I can't escape, the one who makes the silence worth breaking." I froze. My blood ran cold, because I knew that voice. I'd heard it whisper goodnight 1,000 times. I'd heard it laugh, shout, sigh. It was Greg, my husband. The voice that shattered my world. I couldn't move. The moment that familiar voice filled the room, something inside me broke apart. I replayed the audio once, twice, 3 times, each time hoping I'd realize I was mistaken, that it wasn't Greg. That maybe the quality of the recording or my tired mind was playing tricks on me. But the more I listened, the more undeniable it became. It was him. The same inflection. The same subtle rasp at the end of his sentences. The same way he lingered on certain words. Storm, silence, worth. Words he had used in that poem years ago, the one I thought he'd long forgotten. My heart pounded so violently it felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. I sat there in the dark, my laptop screen casting pale light across the room, the poem still looping softly in my ears. Greg, my husband, he was Second Chance 77. No, it couldn't be. Greg wasn't the type to do something like that. He barely knew how to set up a Netflix account, let alone create fake online profiles. And why would he? What possible reason could he have for pretending to be someone else? Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was losing my mind. Desperate for answers, I opened the chat again, scrolling through our messages. My eyes darted over every line, looking for something I'd missed. He used phrases Greg often said, like, "Let's start fresh," or "It's not about right or wrong, it's about us." And the way he typed, capitalizing the first letter of every line, even mid-sentence. That was exactly how Greg wrote emails. A cold realization crept up my spine. What if he'd known all along? What if he'd seen me on the app and decided to play along, to test me, to trap me? The thought made my stomach twist. Was he punishing me? Or worse, was he trying to toy with me? I spent the next hour pacing the room, my thoughts spiraling. My husband, the man who had barely spoken to me for months, had been pretending to be a stranger online. He had lured me in with words I'd been starving to hear, made me believe in someone new, when it was him all along. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. I created a new account on Heartlines using a different name, Lila. The profile was simple, quiet, designed to look unassuming. I searched for Second Chance 77 and sent him a message. "Lila, hi, I liked your writing on the forums. You seem thoughtful." It didn't take long for him to respond. Second Chance 77. "Thanks. I just write what I feel." I smiled bitterly. That was something Greg always said when I'd compliment his old poetry. I decided to push further. "Lila, do you live nearby?" Second Chance 77. "A small suburb outside the city. Not much to look at, but it's home." That was us. Lila. What do you do for work? Second Chance 77. Marketing. Boring stuff, but it pays the bills. My blood went cold. Still, I needed to be sure. I needed something only Greg would know. Lila. If you could go anywhere in the world right now, where would it be? His answer came quickly. Second Chance 77. Scotland. There's this little inn in Inverness with the best coffee. My wife and I stayed there years ago. My hand flew to my mouth. That was our honeymoon. He had even gotten the detail about the coffee right. I felt sick. It was him. There was no question anymore. My mind raced through every conversation we'd had, the confessions, the flirtation, the secrets I'd spilled. He had been there, behind the screen, reading every word, listening as I confessed how lonely I was, how I no longer felt seen by my husband. He had listened to all of it. The humiliation burned through me like acid. I had opened my heart to him, believing I'd found someone kind, someone who cared. And all along, it had been Greg, hiding behind another name. I slammed my laptop shut and pressed my palms against my face, shaking. My marriage wasn't just falling apart, it had been weaponized. Why? Why would he do this? To punish me? To test me? To mock me for needing connection? I tried to think rationally, but my thoughts were a hurricane. Maybe this was his way of saving us. Maybe he'd wanted to win me back by pretending to be someone else. But how twisted was that? He could have just talked to me. Instead, he'd built a lie. When Greg came home that night, I could barely look at him. He greeted me with the same calm smile, kissed my cheek, and asked how my day was. His voice was the same one that had whispered those poems to me through a screen hours earlier. I wanted to scream, to throw my laptop at him, to make him confess. But I didn't. Not yet. If he wanted to play games, I'd play too. Over the next few days, I acted normal, almost cheerful. I made dinner, asked about his day, laughed at his jokes. I needed time to think, to plan. I needed to be certain before confronting him. But every moment felt like living in a lie within a lie. Each time my phone buzzed with a message from Second Chance 77, I watched Greg out of the corner of my eye, waiting for any reaction. Sometimes when I'd glance at him suddenly, I'd catch him looking at me with a strange expression, something between guilt and curiosity. One night, while he was brushing his teeth, I picked up his phone from the nightstand. My hands shook as I scrolled through his apps, but there was nothing. No heart lines, no trace. He was smarter than that. Still, I had my proof, and I wanted him to see that I knew. So I sent Second Chance 77 one final message, me. Let's meet. Tomorrow night, same cafe, no excuses this time. He replied almost instantly, Second Chance 77. You're sure? Me. Yes, it's time we stop hiding. Second Chance 77. I'll be there. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady now, my mind eerily calm. Tomorrow night, I would look him in the eyes, not as Camilla, the lonely wife, or his muse online, but as the woman he had deceived. If Greg wanted to see how far I'd go, he was about to find out. Dinner with a ghost. I arrived 15 minutes early, though I'd spent most of the afternoon convincing myself not to go. I told myself it was pointless, that nothing good could come from meeting the man behind the screen, but I had to see it with my own eyes. I had to know. The cafe looked different that night. The same soft lighting, the same faint scent of roasted beans and cinnamon, but now it felt like a stage. Every table was a spotlight, every sound amplified by my nerves. I took a seat in the same corner I had before, the one by the window where I had waited like a fool weeks ago. My heart was a drumbeat against my ribs as I stared at the door. Every time it opened, my breath hitched. I told myself I would be calm, that I wouldn't make a scene, that I'd simply look him in the eyes and ask why. Minutes crawled by. I glanced at my phone. A message from Second Chance 77 blinked on the screen. Second Chance 77. I'm here, walking in now. I lifted my eyes and froze. It was Greg. He stepped through the door, his familiar navy jacket half-zipped, his phone in his hand. He looked around the cafe, scanning the crowd. When his gaze landed on me, he stopped cold. His face drained of color. For a long, unbearable moment, neither of us moved. The world around us blurred. All I could hear was the rush of blood in my ear. Greg's lips parted slightly, as if he was about to speak, but no sound came out. Slowly, he walked toward me, each step heavy, uncertain. When he finally reached the table, he set his phone down, face up. The same screen name, Second Chance 77, flashed in a notification. That was all the confirmation I needed. I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's you." He nodded, eyes darting away. "Camilla, I can explain." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made a few heads turn. "Explain? You catfished your own wife, Greg? What could you possibly explain?" "Please," he said, lowering his voice, sliding into the chair across from me. "It wasn't like that. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stared at him, waiting. He ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. "I saw your profile by accident. At first I couldn't believe it was you. I thought maybe it was fate or something stupid like that. I just wanted to see what you'd say. I wanted to understand how you felt. About us." I clenched my fists under the table. "So you pretended to be a stranger, lied to me, made me fall for someone who didn't exist?" Greg flinched. "You didn't fall for someone who didn't exist. You fell for me." "No," I snapped, my voice trembling. "I fell for a man who listened, who cared, who made me feel seen. That wasn't you, Greg. That was the person you pretended to be." He looked up at me then, his eyes full of regret. "I missed you. I missed the way you used to look at me. I thought if I could remind you of who we were, maybe we could find our way back." I shook my head slowly. "By tricking me? By making me confide in a stranger who was secretly my husband?" "I didn't plan it," he said desperately. "At first it was just curiosity. But then we started talking and I realized something. I was falling in love with you again. You were open, funny, kind. You were the woman I fell for years ago. I just didn't know how to reach her anymore." The words hit me like shards of glass. My heart ached, not because of his confession, but because of the twisted truth behind it. "You had a choice, Greg," I said quietly. "You could have talked to me. You could have told me you missed me. Instead, you built this fantasy. You made me think someone out there actually saw me." His voice broke. "I did see you, Camilla. I just had to lose you first to remember how." The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled. "You didn't lose me, Greg. You pushed me away. And then you came back wearing someone else's face." He reached across the table, his hand trembling, but I pulled mine back. The weight of what he'd done crushed the air between us. All those nights I'd spent pouring my heart out to Second Chance 77, confessing things I'd never dared say aloud. He'd been on the other end, reading every word, every secret, every ache. I felt exposed, violated, humiliated. He whispered, "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did." My voice cracked. "You hurt me worse than if you'd actually cheated." Greg's shoulders sagged. "I just wanted to bring us back. I thought maybe if I could remind you of the connection we had." "By deceiving me?" He said nothing. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "You don't get to talk about connection, Greg. You manipulated me. You made me question my own sanity. Do you even realize what that does to someone?" People were staring now, but I didn't care. My eyes blurred as I grabbed my bag. "I can't do this," I whispered. "Camilla, please." His voice cracked. "Just listen." But I was already walking away. The bell above the cafe door jingled as I stepped into the cool night air. The world outside felt too bright, too loud. My hands shook as I tried to catch my breath. I felt like I'd just walked out of a nightmare only to realize it was my own life. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A message from him. I hesitated before opening it, but curiosity, cruel, relentless curiosity, won. It wasn't a message. It was an email. Long. The subject line read, "Please read this, Camilla." Against my better judgment, I opened it. "I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust in ways I may never repair. But when I talked to you as him, I saw you again. The real you. I fell in love with you all over again, not because of the lie, but because I finally listened. You reminded me who we used to be, and I don't know how to forgive myself for needing a disguise to find you again." My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. "I didn't just create that account to see if you still loved me. I did it because I needed to remember how to love you. I slammed the phone down on the passenger seat, choking back sobs. Love? He called this love? If love was supposed to make you feel alive, then why did it feel like I'd just been hollowed out from the inside? The man I thought I'd fallen for online was gone, and the man I married, I wasn't sure I even knew him anymore. His confession, my collapse. I must have read Greg's email a dozen times that night, every word cut deeper than the last. It was long, carefully written, full of emotion, maybe too much. It sounded less like an apology and more like a love letter to the version of me he thought he had rediscovered. He wrote about missing the woman I used to be, the one who laughed easily, who kissed him at stoplights, who stayed up late just to talk. He said it wasn't about deceit or control, but about finding us again. He said the anonymity had given him the courage to speak without fear, to love me openly again. I never meant to manipulate you, Camilla, he wrote. I wanted to reach you. But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you all over again, and I didn't know how to stop. Reading those words, my chest felt hollow. There was sincerity in them, yes, but also a kind of selfishness that made my stomach turn. He wrote about how lonely he'd been, how lost, how desperate to rekindle what we once had. But nowhere in that letter did he acknowledge what he'd taken from me. My trust, my safety, my sense of reality. I shut my laptop and sat in silence for a long time, staring into the darkness. Greg came home late, as usual. I heard the front door creak open, the soft shuffle of his shoes on the hardwood floor. I stayed still on the couch, pretending to be asleep. I couldn't face him, not yet. I couldn't even look at him without feeling the weight of everything that had happened. In the morning, he left a single rose on the kitchen counter, no note, no words, just the flower, red and perfect, a symbol of love that now felt like an accusation. I started to unravel slowly after that. Some days, I'd wake up angry, furious at him for betraying me in the most twisted way imaginable. Other days, I'd feel a deep sadness, a grief I couldn't quite name. I'd stare at our wedding photo on the wall and wonder when the strangers had moved into the lives of the couple in that frame. I began therapy a week later. Sitting across from a woman named Lydia, I spilled everything. The distance, the loneliness, the chat app, the deception. Lydia listened quietly, her eyes soft but unflinching. When I finished, she said something that stayed with me. You didn't fall for a stranger, Camilla. You fell for attention, for validation, for being seen, and that's not shameful, it's human. That line cracked something inside me, because it was true. I had been starving for connection, and when anyone had offered it, I devoured it. I told Lydia I didn't know if I could ever forgive Greg. She didn't push me to. She just said healing takes time, and sometimes forgiveness isn't part of that process. Friends had their own opinions, of course. My best friend Rachel was furious when I told her the truth. Cam, that's emotional abuse, she said bluntly over coffee. He deceived you. You should leave him. But another friend, Nina, took a softer stance. Maybe it's fate, she suggested. Maybe he needed to lose you in disguise to find you again. I didn't know what to think anymore. Greg tried. God, he really tried. He started coming home early, cooking dinner, asking about my day like it mattered. He bought flowers, planned date nights, even suggested couples therapy, but every gesture felt hollow, staged. When he touched me, I flinched. When he said he loved me, I searched his face for lies. It wasn't that I didn't believe he cared. It was that I no longer knew what real meant between us. I deleted all my online accounts one by one. Heartlines was the first to go. Then the social media apps, then the email address I'd used for chatting. I wanted to disappear, to become invisible again, but on my own terms this time. The emptiness that followed was strange, almost peaceful. No more notifications, no more waiting for messages that would twist my emotions into knots. Just quiet. But quiet has a way of making you face things you've been running from. In that silence, I found myself replaying memories of the early days with Greg, the long drives with the windows down, the nights we couldn't stop talking, the way he'd look at me like I was the only person in the world. Those memories hurt now. They weren't comforting. They were ghosts of something I wasn't sure had ever been real. I started asking myself dangerous questions. Did Greg ever really love me, or just the version of me he created in his mind? And what about me? Did I ever truly love him, or just the idea of being loved by him? The deeper I thought, the more lost I felt. Therapy helped, but there were nights when the loneliness came back stronger than ever. I'd lie awake beside him, feeling like there was an ocean between us, even as his breathing filled the room. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me, quiet, almost afraid. He'd reach for my hand, and I'd let him, but the touch didn't feel the same. It felt like a question neither of us knew how to answer. One evening, after another awkward dinner filled with forced small talk, Greg finally said it aloud. "I know I ruined everything," staring at his plate, "but I still love you, Camilla. I don't know how to stop." I wanted to tell him I loved him too, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said, "You can't love someone through a lie, Greg. You can only lose them that way." He nodded slowly, as if he already knew. That night, I went to bed before him, pretending to. I heard him in the next room, typing, probably another email he'd never send. The faint clack of the keyboard echoed through the house like distant raindrops. I closed my eyes and let tears spill quietly onto the pillow. I was grieving a marriage that still technically existed, but in every way that mattered, it was already gone. A few days later, I sat on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. My phone was clean. No apps, no distractions, just peace. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again, until the notification appeared, a message from an unknown number. My pulse quickened as I opened it. Unknown. "I miss you, Camilla. It's me again." My hands went cold. No name, no context, just those 7 words. Was it Greg trying to reach me again from another account? Or someone else entirely? The world around me seemed to tilt slightly, and all that fragile calm I'd built began to crack. Because after everything that had happened, I no longer knew which was worse, being deceived again, or the possibility that a part of me wanted it to be him. The second betrayal. The message haunted me for days. "I miss you, Camilla. It's me again." I told myself not to respond. I told myself it was probably Greg, trying another twisted way to win me back. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and after everything that had happened, silence felt unbearable. I waited a full day before replying. Me. "Who is this?" No response for hours. Then, late that night, unknown. "Someone who understands you, someone who can listen." My stomach clenched. It was the same tone, the same rhythm Greg used when he'd written as Dream Writer, 89, and later as Second Chance, 77. Every word chosen to pull at my emotions, every sentence designed to sound safe. I stared at the phone, torn between fury and disbelief. Was he really doing this again? Greg had been trying so hard lately. Flowers, long walks, therapy sessions. Could he really still be hiding behind another mask? I decided to find out. This time I wasn't going to be the one caught off guard. I was done being the fool. Me. "Okay, then listen. What do you want from me?" Unknown. "Just to talk. I think you need that." That phrase, "you need that," hit me like a ghost of old conversations. Greg used to say it during our counseling sessions. I almost laughed at the irony. Fine, I thought. 2 can play this game. I slipped my phone into my pocket, forcing myself to act normal around Greg. If he was behind it, he wouldn't know I suspected him. Days passed, and the messages continued. The person on the other end claimed to be someone named Evan. He said he'd come across me on a writing forum where I'd once posted short stories. He admired my words, said they sounded like someone trying to heal. It was clever, almost too clever. "Do you live nearby?" Evan. "Not far. The city's small when hearts connect." That poetic nonsense could have been straight from Greg's playbook. But there was something slightly off, subtler, more measured. Whoever this was knew how to write with intention. After a week, I decided to bait him. I dropped small, specific hints from my life. Details no stranger could know. Me. "I've been trying to pick up painting again. My therapist says it might help." Evan. "That's wonderful. You mentioned once your favorite colors were deep blue and gold, right?" My pulse spiked. I had never mentioned that in our chats, but I had told Lydia, my therapist. I tried another test. Me. "Sometimes I dream about the ocean. My therapist thinks it's about control. Evan. He's right. Dreams like that are about surrendering. He. The word stopped me cold. Lydia was a woman, but I'd been in a group session recently, co-facilitated by her colleague, Dr. Martin, a soft-spoken man who often smiled too much when he spoke to me. He'd once told me, "You're brave, Camilla. You just need someone who truly listens." The pieces began to fall together, horrifyingly, sickeningly. I decided to push harder. Me. Funny. You remind me of someone I talked to in therapy. Evan. Maybe that's because you talk about me in therapy. I froze. My hands went numb. No stranger. Could have written that. Me. Who are you? Evan. You know who I am. My breath came in shallow gasps. I typed furiously. Me. Dr. Martin. No response for several minutes. Then, Evan. I didn't mean to frighten you. I just wanted to be there for you in a different way. You said you needed someone who listens. I've been that for you. I felt sick. My therapist. The person I had trusted to guide me through the wreckage Greg left behind. Anna had been listening, watching, studying me, using the most private details of my sessions to connect with me outside of therapy, to become the very kind of emotional support he was supposed to protect me from seeking. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. Instead, I typed one final message. Me. What you did is disgusting. Evan. Camilla, don't say that. I care about you. You said you felt alone. I just wanted to help you feel seen. Seen. The word made my skin crawl. The same word that started everything. With Greg, with the lies, with the apps. Me. You don't get to use my pain as an excuse. You're supposed to help me heal, not use me. Then I blocked him, deleted the chat. And for the first time in months, I cried. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I was furious. I reported him the next morning. The clinic's director listened with a horrified expression, assuring me they'd handle it immediately. Lydia called me later that day, her voice gentle and trembling. I'm so sorry, Camilla. He's been suspended pending investigation. You did the right thing. I didn't feel like I had. I felt dirty, violated, tired. When I told Greg what had happened, expecting blame or suspicion, he surprised me. He sat down beside me on the couch and just listened. Really listened. Camilla, he said softly, I know I've made things worse for you in every possible way, but you didn't deserve any of this. He didn't try to defend himself or the past. He didn't even say, I told you so. He just took my hand, carefully, gently, and said, I'm here, if you'll let me be. Something inside me cracked again, but this time it wasn't rage. It was exhaustion. For the first time in months, I leaned into his shoulder and let myself cry. In the days that followed, Greg became my anchor. He drove me to therapy sessions with a new counselor, made me tea at night, and didn't push for forgiveness. He just stayed, quiet, steady, remorseful. And yet, the trust was gone. Every word he said, every text he sent, came with an invisible question mark. Was this the real him? Or another version, crafted to make me feel safe? I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But after being betrayed twice, first by the man I loved, then by the person I trusted to help me heal, I wasn't sure what trust even looked like anymore. One evening, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the flickering candlelight on the coffee table. Greg was in the kitchen, humming softly as he cleaned up. For a moment, the sound was comforting, familiar. And then it hit me. He still loved me. Despite everything, he was trying. But as I watched his silhouette move behind the doorway, one thought anchored itself deep in my chest. He might love me, but I didn't know if I could ever love him again. Learning to love myself first. I packed my bags quietly one morning in early spring. Greg was still asleep, his breathing slow and even, the kind of peaceful rhythm that once used to calm me. Now it only reminded me how separate our worlds had become. I didn't leave a dramatic note or slam any doors. I simply left a message on the kitchen table that read, I need space to find myself again. Leaving wasn't easy. After more than a decade of marriage, every corner of our house held a memory. Some joyful, others painful. But I knew if I stayed, I'd keep trying to fix what wasn't mine to fix anymore. I needed to heal. Not as Greg's wife, not as anyone's companion, but as Camilla. I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much. Bare walls, mismatched furniture, but it was quiet, and it was mine. The first few nights were hard. The silence felt too heavy, like an echo of everything I'd lost. I kept expecting a message notification, some sign of someone reaching out, but there was nothing, just me, the stillness, and the sound of my own thoughts. For the first time in years, I had no one else's emotions to navigate, only my own, and it was terrifying. Therapy helped. My new counselor, Dr. Alvarez, was gentle but firm. She didn't try to patch my wounds with empty reassurances. Instead, she asked questions that forced me to look inward. What did you need, Camilla? Not from Greg. From yourself. At first, I didn't have an answer. I was so used to defining my worth by the way someone else saw me. When Greg had stopped looking, I'd gone searching for eyes that would. That's what drew me to Dream Writers 89. It wasn't the mystery or the romance. It was the feeling of being heard. He listened. He saw the parts of me I'd buried beneath years of neglect. But that was the problem. I'd been waiting for someone else to validate my existence, when all along I needed to listen to myself. Dr. Alvarez helped me build small routines, things that belonged only to me. I started journaling again, filling pages with thoughts I hadn't dared voice aloud. I took long walks in the mornings, letting the sunlight wash over me, breathing in the world as if it were brand new. I joined a pottery class where I molded imperfect bowls and mugs that somehow felt symbolic of everything I'd been through. Cracked, uneven, but still beautiful. For the first time, I stopped checking my phone compulsively. The silence that used to feel suffocating began to feel like peace. Greg didn't fight my decision to move out. He called once that first week, his voice quiet, respectful. I understand, he said. Take all the time you need. I'll be here if you ever want to talk. There was no pleading, no manipulation, just sincerity. And oddly, that made me cry more than anything else. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the jagged edges of my pain began to soften. I realized that healing wasn't a straight line. It was messy, unpredictable, filled with moments of doubt and clarity tangled together. Sometimes I'd still think about him, the man behind the screen, the one who'd written me poems and told me I was his light. I'd catch myself wondering if maybe those words had been real, even if the deception wasn't. But then I'd remember how hollow I felt when I found out the truth. Love built on lies, no matter how pretty the words, always collapses under its own weight. I began to understand that Greg hadn't been the only one hiding behind a screen. I had too. The online conversations, the secret messages, they were all ways for me to escape facing what I'd become. A woman afraid of her own silence. By the third month, I felt stronger. I wasn't fixed, but I no longer felt broken either. One evening, while cleaning up, I found my old phone in a drawer. It still had the Heartlines app installed. For a long moment, I stared at the icon, the place where everything had begun and fallen apart. My thumb hovered over it, then I deleted it. The small vibration that followed felt like an exhale, a release of everything I'd been holding on to. A week later, Greg called again. His tone was cautious but warm. Would you like to meet for coffee? I hesitated, but something inside me whispered yes, not out of obligation, not out of longing, but because I was ready to face him without fear. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, neutral ground. When I walked in, he stood to greet me, the same way he always had when we were dating. His smile was tentative, his eyes softer than I remembered. Hi, Cam, he said. Hi, Greg. We talked for hours, about ordinary things at first, then about the chaos that had nearly destroyed us. He apologized again, but this time he didn't make excuses. I know sorry doesn't undo it, he said, but I mean it. I shouldn't have tried to find you by pretending to be someone else. I should have just listened. I nodded, and I should have spoken sooner. We both stopped trying long before you created that account. He smiled faintly. Maybe we both needed to lose each other to learn how to see again. I didn't respond. I didn't know if I agreed. But for the first time, his words didn't hurt. They simply existed, part of a past that no longer defined me. When we finished our coffee, he asked, Do you think we'll ever find our way back? I looked out the window, watching people pass by, each lost in their own world. Maybe, I said softly. But even if we don't, I think I finally found my way back to myself. He nodded, eyes glistening. There was no dramatic ending, no promise of reconciliation. Just two people sitting across from each other, finally honest, finally still. After that day, I didn't hear from him much, and that was okay. Our story didn't need a fairy tale conclusion. It just needed closure. Life began to feel lighter. I painted my apartment walls yellow, filled the space with plants and sunlight. I wrote again, not to anyone, not for anyone, just for me. I realized I didn't need another dream writer to tell me I mattered. I didn't need anyone to listen to my words to make them real, because for the first time in years, I was listening to myself. I didn't know what the future held, whether Greg and I would ever find a new beginning, or if we'd simply drift into separate lives. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Love, real love, begins within, and mine was finally awakening. As I sat at my desk one morning, sunlight spilling through the curtains, I opened my journal and wrote the last words of my story, the truth I'd fought so long to uncover. The man behind the screen was my husband, but the woman behind the words became someone new, someone finally free. In the end, I realized love isn't about being tested or proven. It's about being seen, without lies, without masks, without fear. My husband's deception broke me, but it also forced me to rebuild from the truth. I no longer chase someone else's version of love, because now I finally know how to love myself first. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who teach us what love really costs. If this story touched your heart or made you think twice about who's behind the screen, don't leave without sharing it with someone who needs to hear it too. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that remind us how fragile love and trust can be. Tell me in the comments. If you discovered your partner had been pretending to be someone else online, would you forgive them or walk away forever?